Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show. I'm so delighted to host this show for you today. We're going to be talking with the co-founder of the education platform, Primal Happiness, and the host of the top 10 ranked iTunes happiness podcast, the Primal Happiness Show. So that Lian Brook-Tyler is with us today. Welcome, Lian.
Hello, welcome. I don't know what I'm so used to hosting mine.
I know, it's unusual.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And of course, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, but you already know that. So back to Lian. Lian was lucky to have had an amazingly happy upbringing, which is unusual in this world today, bursting with love and adventure. And then 18 years ago, she was attacked, which resulted in chronic facial pain, massive attacks, and anxiety. And that started a long search for relief from her emotional and physical pain. She tried traditional medicine and then most types of self-help and woo. Nothing helped until she discovered the innate nature of happiness, why we lose it and how we can reclaim it. And her anxiety, fears, limitations, and even chronic pain dropped away. And now her life is ridiculously happy again. And her mission is to help other people reclaim their primal power and actualize their potential. And so it's so perfect that that we're interviewing today, Lian, because of course I just launched the Skills Not Pills movement. And sharing a similar message that, most of us are given this one-way road for solving all problems, and it leads to the doctor's office, and it usually leads to a prescription. And that didn't really serve me, along with the other avenue of psychotherapy sessions weekly to talk about all the problems in my life, right? So you and I have been through a journey. And we've gotten to the other side where we were able to sustain happiness. So I think people are really curious about that, because especially if people are out there that are having any kind of challenge, health-wise or emotional, mental challenges, happiness can seem like a faraway thing. Happiness can seem like a struggle to get to. And you and I have gotten to the other side where there's sort of like this realization that no matter what's going on in your life, you can have happiness. So let's lead somebody on a journey of discovery with that. Let's start with your story. We gave a highlight, but tell us, fill in some more of the details on your own journey.
Sure. So, it's as you said at the start, I think I was quite rarely lucky in my upbringing. I think it had so many ingredients that I now see are very natural to human beings, and when humans are raised in that way, it really does help us to stay in touch with that innate happiness. And so I was very lucky in that I had loads of those ingredients. I had lots of love, lots of freedom, and I now look back and realize how important those things were, and also, as you say, how rare they were. And then what happened was, obviously I lived a bit in between, but then I had the attack that you mentioned, and I think it was interesting that at the time, I don't think I actually realized the effect it had on me. It kind of, the effect with the chronic facial pain and then the panic attacks and anxiety started happening probably a month or so, a couple of months after that happened. And I guess I knew that it was because of that, because that was such a big event into my life, and then kind of all these things started happening as a result. But I don't think I really understood what had happened. I don't think I really understood the link between the two, like why trauma can have that effect on us. And as you said, I tried so many things. I was put on crazy kind of drugs to try and help with the facial pain. It was some kind of nerve issue, they thought. So they tried all sorts of things, kind of antidepressants. So I think I was offered anti-epilepsy drugs. I had extensive dental work, all sorts of things, and then kind of went into the whole, NLP, meditation, all kinds of things. And it just stayed at the same level. And I say on top of that, I then had I guess I wouldn't necessarily known at the time to describe it as anxiety, but I can see now looking back, it was like this undertone sort of running through where I just didn't feel safe, I suppose. And yeah, that kind of, you know, what you're talking about there, the skills not pills, I can so relate to you, because it just felt that there were no other answers out there. It felt like I'd kind of reached the end of the line of the options out there, and had, I think, pretty much just accepted this is what my life is going to be. Like, I'll make the best of it. There's lots of nice things in my life, but I have to just live with the chronic pain and the anxiety.
And I think that's a lot of people's journey when they get chronic illness, is that they get to this place where they say, well, there must not be a solution for me, you know,
Mm,
so I guess I'm just going to be, you know, doomed to have this situation that's uncomfortable forever.
yeah.
And, you know, and then your brain gets wired in that direction.
Mm.
You
And
know, I'm,
it's yeah, even for someone, you know, I've always been a very hopeful, optimistic person. I'm always, I think I'm wired to constantly like look for answers. And so I thought, think if I got to that point where I'd given up, like, I really can see why people end up in that like hopeless place so easily. And it's so common to do so, because it doesn't look like there's answers out there.
yeah. And I think that part of the reason why it doesn't look like there's answers out there is because, well, at least in the United States, you know, there's been a corporate interest in promoting one solution over others, you know, in
Mm,
this country. So because of that, a lot of these other modalities or information that would be super helpful for people to have isn't reaching the minds and the ears of the American consumer. So, for example, this past weekend I was at Paleo FX, and by the time you guys see this, it might be long after this past weekend. But I was at the Paleo FX conference where a lot of people who have had chronic illness discovered this paleo way of eating, which is ancestral diet. So returning to the ancestral diet, returning to the way our ancestors used to eat. So lots of vegetables, a little bit of meat, you know, in general. I mean, it's more complicated than that. But when you look at the quality of our food, you see that our food actually isn't healthy for us. You know, processed food is super bad for us, and it can cause chronic illness. It can cause mental illness. It can cause anxiety. So you couple like all the toxins in your environment, including your food, and, you know, because we also have toxins in our water, toxins in our, you know, the environment that we live in, the electricity, the EMF itself is a toxin. You
mm,
start to look at all the adding up of all that, you know, then it does start to become like this nested ball of like twine. Like, how am I going to pull all these pieces out to find the thing that's going to make the shift for me so that I can get back into a state of happiness, right? So,
mm.
so what was your journey like to find that path? I mean, I know you tried a lot of different things along the way, and NLP being one of those things, which is really neuro linguistic programming, which is dealing with your subconscious mind through hypnosis, correct?
Yes, and it was, and I'm not in any way saying none of those things that I tried don't ever work for anyone. I think, you know, when you look back at your path, I'm sure you'll say the same. You can, when you look back, you can kind of join the dots backwards, as Steve Jobs once said, and you kind of make sense. And you think, oh, I now see why none of that worked for me, because it was meant to work the way it did for me. So I'm not in any way saying, you know, people shouldn't go out and try different things, because for one person it might be different for what it was for me. But yeah, for me, it really had come at the point where I had just given up. Like, it was just accept this and live as happy as life as I can, whilst knowing that's going to include the pain and the anxiety. And then it was the most surprising way it happened, really. My father, who I was really, really close to, he brought me up as a single parent family. And very suddenly and unexpectedly, he died. He was killed in a road traffic accident. So it was a very, yeah, unexpected and quite shocking event, really. And it was a time of real turmoil for my family, because there was a number of other complications with the ambulance service and the police and a criminal investigation all going on at the same time about the accident. And it was so strange, because I remember, I think it was like immediately, probably the day I found out that he'd been killed, I suddenly realized there was something I suppose I describe it as like almost like an undertone to life that I hadn't really seen before. It was suddenly I could see all the surface stuff that was going on with the police and the shock and the grief of my family. And I could see there was something else going on, something deeper and actually truer, that was a pattern behind it all. And I was so shocked. I remember thinking, like, is this me losing my mind? Is this just like how grief is showing up for me? Like, I had no clue what was going on. And even now I struggle to put words to it, but I guess anyone that's had, I guess, any form of spiritual experiences will have their way of kind of identifying what I'm talking about. It was just like I just felt that real deep connection and oneness, I suppose, behind life. And for whatever reason, that was when I was meant to feel that. And so that just continued to deepen, and I guess show up in different ways throughout that year. So again, on the surface, I was dealing with so much stuff, you know, his will and his estate and the continuing criminal investigation and all of that, you know, supporting my family. And I had moments where obviously I'd feel sad or tired or whatever, but the deeper experience of this beautiful thing, this stuff that I couldn't name, was just bigger than that, brighter than that. And so that carried on, and it was almost a year exactly to the date that he died. I realized, wow, there's just something amazing here, something really magical. If it can help me the way that it has helped, you know, the way it's helped me over this last year and has transformed the experience of losing my dad, this must be something I can help other people to access, see, whatever. So I then went on a bit of a search, like, how do I do this? Like, what are the words I can use? Like, what do I do? And then and I'm going to say, like, again, this isn't like the answer. This isn't it just happened to be my part. So I'm just going to sort of give this disclaimer, because I don't want everyone to kind of go rushing thinking, oh, that's the answer. And I actually don't think it is the answer for everyone. It just happened to be, again, my path. I'd come across this, I guess, sort of spiritual philosophy called Three Principles. And I hadn't heard anything about it, decided to Google it. And when the description came up, it was literally a kind of 3-sentence description. And it described the nature of thought and the way it creates our reality. And when I read that line, just one line, it was like a bomb had gone off in my head. And all of a sudden it was just like, wow, oh my goodness. And that, coupled with this sense of connection that I feel, that changes everything. And I remember actually saying out loud, like, this changes everything. And I suddenly could see how all of the things I thought I was scared of, all the things I thought I was held back by, they all just didn't really make sense anymore. They just sort of just dissolved, really. And it was about a week after that, I was driving my children to school and then suddenly realized the pain's gone. That facial pain I'd had all that time had just gone.
Wow.
Yeah, just like that. And never had a panic attack since. I mean, I probably have, you know, what, you know, like that kind of like low level sort of excitement stroke kind of trepidation, like now and again, like everyone does, but I don't have anything resembling a kind of, you know, chronic anxiety, nothing like that. It just went.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I just, again, want to say it just happened that way for me. But ultimately, I think what it's pointing back to is that stuff, you know, that just innate wholeness, that innate happiness, that is actually there for all of us.
Yes, it is. And when you can break through to that side. So, yeah, my journey was totally different, obviously. And I agree with you. I would never tell somebody, like, your journey is going to look just like mine, right? Because it's not. And that's actually the beauty of it. I mean, that's really the theme behind Skills Not Pills, is that you are the solver of your puzzle. Like, you came in to this body, this life, and you were gifted a puzzle to solve. And some of the pieces are missing. You know, some of the pieces other people have. Some of the pieces are buried deep within you. Some of the pieces you have to MacGyver, you know, that TV show. You have to like create your own piece to fit that spot because there isn't one. And it's really your puzzle to solve. You get to solve it. And when I finally stepped into that, instead of being like the victim to my experience, or, you know, blaming other, you know, blaming life, blaming my parents, blaming whoever for my experience, when I finally realized, oh, this is a puzzle, it's a game, it's supposed to be fun and interesting at some level for my soul to experience. And it might be painful at the person level, but at the soul level, this is a fun game, you know?
Yes.
So when I finally realized that, I was like, oh, okay. So in other words, my human self, my ego self, is going to experience a range of things. And those things can be very difficult and uncomfortable to experience. And, or it could be like fantastic to experience, conversely. And all of it is the experience that then the soul gets to have. So in a way, like, have compassion for your small self, because your small self's the one that has to like be on the front lines and experience everything. So that's how you can love your ego, because it's willing to do that for you. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, I love that. I really love the way you just described it as a puzzle. It's interesting how we forget that contract our soul made. And obviously that's the design of it. We're not meant to stay present to that and meant to kind of stay conscious. Oh no, I chose this, because otherwise it kind of wouldn't feel real. But we do forget that beautiful puzzle that we decided to be born into, to experience and to play with. And like you say, when you're like up front and looking at the puzzle, it feels blooming hard. But it's lovely, those moments we get to kind of zoom out and recognize, oh yes, that's almost the purpose. The purpose is the puzzle.
The purpose of and you have to say, well, you don't have to do anything. You can do whatever you want. Some people, that's the beauty of it too. We have free will. So we can live the whole life believing the puzzle is real, and kind of trudge through the experience with a great deal of suffering, or we can live the whole life, you know, spiritually abstracted from the whole thing and not really experience it. Or we can do a combination, like we can kind of float between the two, you know, and blend those two realities into one. And that's, I think that's my work for myself, is being able to allow myself to have the experience, you know, the drama, the pathos, you know, like these big moments of emotional experience, and these painful things that happen, or these wonderful ecstatic things that happen. And then also at the same time to keep that awareness, this is an experience and none of it's really real. Like, I'm enjoying it. It's the best virtual reality in town, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And there is something wonderful about being able to see both sides. But when you're in one, be fully immersed in it. It's not like, for example, when I'm eating cake, I'm constantly saying to myself, this isn't real, this isn't real. Because there'd be no damn point doing that.
Yeah. Why else am I eating the cake? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's lovely to be able to have the opportunity to, I don't know, eat the cake and really eat the cake, and then maybe meditate and really meditate.
Yeah, definitely be immersed in, well, that's what presence is about. You know, presence is that experience of really being in the moment and being fully experiencing that moment.
Yeah.
For what it gives you, for what it offers you, for what it presents to you. And I think that many of us, I know for myself, I lived a lot of my life not in presence. You know, through until I had my awakening, I lived a lot of my life in the old story. You know, I actually remember that moment, being able to recreate a former moment that I wanted to keep experiencing, and just obsessively recreating it in my mind, like over and over and over and over, recreating that experience, not letting it go, wanting it to be like forever there. And it led me to, you know, a worsening state of mind, a worsening state of my relationships. And it led to a collapse, really, of my entire life. And when I finally learned how to let go of the past and just be in the moment, not like project myself out into the future constantly, like where do I want to be, and not be living in the past constantly, but to be like just right here with what
Mm.
is. That's hard though, when, like you've had an experience where you had physical pain when you were right here.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
how do
I
you
think,
help people
yes.
with that? Because that is
Mm.
hard.
It is, and I think that's the challenge. And I think when when being present to the present is painful, I think it can be really annoying to hear people say it's all about the now, it's all about present.
It's like, I don't want to be
Like,
present to this.
yeah. And like, even I used to find meditating so hard, so challenging, and it was either a combination of just quite stressful to try to be present to like this noise that was constantly going on in my head, frustrating because I couldn't do it. And so it's kind of like, even the things that people are saying to help me get more present are just even more infuriating. So if you're listening and that's that sort of is you, I totally get it. I've really been there. And I think it's one of those things where I think sometimes the indirect route is actually the more helpful route. And I think going directly at, oh, I'm not present, I need to be more present, that can actually create more of a challenge where we're so focused on that resistance, it actually gets harder to be with. And I think the more indirect route, it can look like all sorts of things, as we keep saying, there is not one path here for everyone. And for some people, it may well be meditation is what allows them to access that kind of space between their thoughts where the present gets less and less painful to be with, because ultimately a lot of the time it is being created by our thoughts. For other people, it could just be time in nature, it could be just doing things that you enjoy. But I think one way or another, to get that perspective, get that bit of distance away from that kind of just total intense focus on our thoughts in the moment. And if those thoughts in the moment are really painful thoughts in the moment, no wonder that's an uncomfortable experience to be present to. So one way or another, to just get a bit of space, a bit of distance. And again, looking for a more indirect way of doing that can actually be, I guess, more enjoyable for a start, but actually more helpful in the long run.
Yeah, the more I look at this healing journey, the more I think to myself, what was the real answer? Um, I think that a really big part of it was developing that internal navigation system
Mm.
and learning how to tune within myself and really listen deeply, like listen to my thoughts, listen to the echoes in my mind, which are different than my thoughts. So the echoes in your mind being those tapes from the past, or, I had some early childhood stuff. So like those old voices I might have heard when I was a little kid from my first stepfather, things like that. Echoes from the past. And sometimes it's echoes from your environment that you didn't even know you picked up.
Mm.
Because your mind is sort of like a recording machine in some ways. So becoming aware of that, and then also tuning into my body, like learning how to listen to my body, to my cells, to my organs, like tuning into the sensations in my body, knowing that they had messages for me.
Mm.
I think that was a big awakening, because the modality that I practiced, I used lots of different modalities of healing, like energy healing. I was trained at the Four Winds, and that's Peruvian shamanism. That it's wonderful. It totally works. But so does, for many people, so does NLP or hypnosis or other modalities, right? So I don't think it's the modality so much
Mm.
as like the ability to tune within
Yes.
and really listen deeply to yourself.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And I think there's often two things at play, and I think they can be confusing. I think when we talk about going inside and listening, I think sometimes what ends up coming up isn't always that helpful. And I think particularly when we've been so used to listening to that chatter of our ego, and you think, listen to that, there's that that's causing me pain. However, I think even just listening to chatter and recognizing that that chatter is just chatter, and also how that chatter is making you feel, I think even recognizing that can be a real step forward, rather than just be fully engaging it and thinking it's real and thinking, oh my goodness, I must listen to, you know, whatever this chatter's saying about me, whatever that, you know, usually it's not great stuff, right? I think even just recognizing that's what's going on in itself can be really helpful. But then I think also recognizing there is this kind of deeper, and I don't want to necessarily say the word voice, because I don't think it necessarily always comes as a voice in the same way. You know, our thoughts are quite often, they are different for everyone, but often they have like a verbal component that sounds literally like a voice talking. I think there is this deeper presence that we can hear when we listen for it. And it doesn't always sound like a chatter voice. It can come as a feeling, a knowing, a sense of just completeness and love. And I think even just knowing it's there to be heard when we tune into it, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, giving yourself the space to tap into that greater presence. And here's a really good tip for doing that. This is one that I had to use because I spent a lot of time in front of the mirror. When I was growing up, my mom and my second stepdad who was my dad my whole life, and he just passed away, so I just want to honor, like, I totally understand that experience. Is I used to be very opinionated. I know that's hard to believe, that I had a lot to say and I was opinionated. And my parents were like, "Oh man, Carrie, you won't stop. You got so much to say. So here, we want you to speak. We want you to do it in front of the mirror. Like, just go in the bathroom and close the door. Just talk to the mirror." So, you know, now my mom is like, "You're out there talking about all this stuff." And I said, "Mom, I'm still talking to the mirror. You can't get upset with me. You taught me how to do it." So, you know, here's the thing though, all that time in front of the mirror, a lot of people, I realized, don't spend time in front of the mirror. They don't actually do that. And I realized what a gift that was. At first I thought it was mean because, you know, they just didn't want to listen to me. But, you know, but in retrospect, it was a really good skill, you know, because if you can talk to yourself in front of the mirror, and then beyond that, if you can actually just sort of gaze at yourself in the mirror, like, and the best way is left eye to left eye, because that opens this, like the eyes are the window to the soul, like literally. So if you can connect left eye to left eye with yourself in a soft light and just kind of hang out and gaze for a while, and some cool stuff starts to happen, you know, like your face starts to shift colors, or, you know, patterns appear, like, and you'll kind of blink like, did that just happen? And just keep, you know, just keep gazing, and you'll drop into this deep space of connection with yourself. And really that's your soul. You're connecting with that aspect of you that is like the ocean within you, and that is so nourishing to know that that's there. Like, that's so deep. And the chatter, you'll realize the chatter is like up here, and the soul level connection when you tap in is like everywhere else, like whoosh, you know, like
yeah, I love it.
Yeah. It's just an, you know, and I mean, maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. It works for a lot of people, maybe not work for you, but you can find that, like you said, Lian, I love how we keep coming back to this. The best part about this is no two puzzles are alike. I mean, you've interviewed a ton of people for your show. So, you know, how many, every single person, right, has a different pathway.
Yes, I think we're something like, oh gosh, nearly 190 shows in. So, you know, there's a lot of people, and typically they've had their own version of being somewhere towards, I wouldn't say we ever completely solve that puzzle, but, you know, a good way in where they're at a point where they want to share that with other people. And yeah, there's not been one story alike. But the wonderful thing is, what I just see over and over and over again is true for all of us, is that we all have that underlying place, for want of a better word, of just real deep down happiness. That's true for everyone, no matter what the puzzle is.
Yeah, they found and I like to just call that reconnection of awareness.
Mm.
to your soul, because a lot of people think, they'll say things like, oh, I'm disconnected from myself, or I'm disconnected from my soul. You can't be. It's not possible. You could not be in awareness of it,
Mm.
but it's
Yeah.
always there. If you check it, it's almost like in the back of you, right? Like it's behind you somewhere. It's a weird feeling if you tune into it, but I always feel it like it's like someone watching through the back of my head through me or something. Do you know? Does it feel that way
Yeah.
for you? It's such a weird feeling. But you know, it's because it's like it's watching through you, through your being into the world, right?
Mm.
So it's like it put you on or something as a
Yeah.
mask.
Yes, exactly. And I love the way you just described it as, it's kind of, you can't be disconnected from it,
You
but
can't.
it's kind of like, I often think like life's such a, it's like one illusion after another, and each time you think you've seen through one illusion, you think, oh goodness, but hang on, there's another one and another one, another one. It really is like, it's kind of like set of mirrors. It just goes deeper and deeper. It's like one minute you think, wow, I don't know, creating my reality through thought, and then you see this other like deeper illusion like you're describing, where you start to really feel this like there's this soul behind all of this, but that I can only see that in this kind of like fleeting way. So it's like another illusion that we get glimpses of, and then it goes back to not being there. And so it's like these shifting sands of reality that are constantly going on. And yeah, I think even just recognizing that illusion will exist probably up until the moment we die, and that's okay. That's part of the game too.
It's part of the game. I had this realization along those same lines. I had this realization that there's all of us are students in this earth school, and there's one teacher. And it's like the teacher is this, well, whatever you want to live, whatever label you want to use it, but the way that it presents itself is by doing exactly what you just described. It creates realities for each of us. Like it creates the whole virtual reality that we're experiencing with our sight, our awareness, our perception, our feelings, everything, side by side the next person who's having their own totally unique reality that doesn't match yours, side by side, like 8 billion realities happening
Mm.
all concurrently at the same time. And think of the massive orchestration of connections between people that need to connect on certain points of their realities. and then think of your family and or your close ones whose realities don't match yours, and how perfectly they don't match. Like they match in every way as to trigger you and your family members. It's like maximum triggering, you know?
Mm.
It's so amazing to me how the setup is like so complete, and
Yeah.
it's guiding you the whole way. So I'm wise to it now. So I sit back and I go, yeah, that's a setup, you know, like I'm not giving into that one. You know, I'm not believing you anymore. You know, because I know like that's how we don't get upset with other people, because we know that they're not like necessarily lying, because we all think each other's lying, you know,
Mm.
like just you have a conversation with someone and you both walk away from the conversation with a different idea about what just happened.
Mm.
Right? And a lot of people, myself included, early on in my life, before I was able to understand all of these things, I would get so mad at the other person for lying. I'd be like, you're lying. That's not what happened. This is what happened. And they'd be upset with me equally. No, you're lying. This is what happened. Now I see it. I realize, oh, we're both telling the truth. We got shown different things.
Mm.
Dang. It's a total setup. And so you just have to know that the other person, if they're just genuinely expressing, they really did think that.
Mm.
That is really what they perceived from their bubble. And okay, that's not what I perceive from my bubble. So now that we both perceive something different from our bubbles, like how can we get even better at communication to try to bridge the gap so that we're seeing the same reality, so that we are in the same reality together for a moment.
Yeah. And I think, you know how earlier you were saying it's this constant dance between being kind of really in our ego and living life through there, or living life in this kind of just, oh, it's all an illusion and spiritual bypassing your way through it. And I think it's times like this when you can kind of, as you say, you sort of know the setup, you know the game, but still being present enough to play the game. I find really interesting because it, as you say, you know, these setups have actually happened for a reason. These triggers are like there perfectly. So if we're not willing to even engage in it, if we're going to just kind of like, oh, you know, what's just happening is perfect, it's kind of like we're not actually learning what we needed to learn from it either. So I find that a really interesting dichotomy where it's kind of recognizing, oh, what's going on for that person makes complete sense to them, and it's triggering me, and I don't necessarily have to kind of let it take me into that full blown, I'm going to react with, you know, anger or upset or whatever. That's, you know, I can be present, so that's kind of my initial reaction, and I can move through this and see something more deeply. And that's what I find so fascinating, the way that all of those things can happen and be true for us. And so we can kind of still be triggered in that perfect way that, like, you know, it's all designed to, all those things happen, and we can kind of move through it and grow and actually end up with a better connection at the end of it.
Yeah, if we stick with it, exactly, because it
Mm.
is a spiritual bypass to not engage. So when I say,
Yeah.
so just in self-defense, what I do when I find those things is I go, oh, this is a big setup, so I'm not going to react, you know, but I will deal with it, because I'll deal with it in myself, because really all of it is in yourself eventually.
Mm.
You know, the whole reaction, everything is here. So like reacting out there, not as helpful,
Yes.
because they can't do anything about it. They're not in your bubble. You're the only one in there, so they can't really help you with it exactly. But you can clean it up inside your own bubble. And, you know, getting a mentor or somebody is helpful who knows, you know, who kind of understands, like Lian here, who understands this kind of thing, because it's helpful to have an objective, neutral third party that's not involved in that
Mm.
particular bit of setup, you know? We just have a little bit more perspective on it and help guide you into another possibility, you know, for yourself. But those things are there for us to work on. That's why we get these setups with our families, you know, especially our intimate people, so that we can deal with those things within ourselves and clean it up, you know, and learn a lesson along the
Definitely.
way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that Ram Dass quote, something like, think you're spiritual, go spend a week with your family. And I love that because, you know, and some people that's kind of like, instead of family, it might be their neighbors or their friends. But, you know, we all have that, you know, that person or that group of people, right? That still, however much work we've done on ourselves, however much we might float through life, there's that kind of one person that still triggers us. But I love what you said, you know, ultimately it's all still going on in here. And I think when we understand that and can really fully own that, we can then also let that kind of alchemize into something else in here without needing that input from the other person to change that up. I actually had a brilliant example of that the other day. I had a friend over, and it was, it cut a long story short, there was a lot of children and kind of a bit of chaos had happened. My friend was trying to deal with her son, and I just very clumsily kind of got myself involved. It was completely unintentional, but I ended up saying something that wasn't welcome and actually wasn't helpful. And she kind of snapped at me and, you know, pretty much sort of said, you know, this isn't welcome. And I felt that, you know, that initial, you know, triggered that sort of sense of, you know, injustice. You know, I'd actually come over to help, and how dare she speak to me like this? And I had all that just kind of straight in me. And then had that kind of that grace where you have that moment of like recognizing, oh, but it's still in me. And also right now I've triggered her too. You know, when I came over, I triggered her. So this feeling of going on in me, I've just lit that in her too. And so I had that kind of moment of like Racket experiencing that and really feeling like that kind of combination of like anger and just, yeah, like, how dare she? You know, like I came over to help, then realized, oh, that's what's going on inside of me. And then, oh, that's what's going on inside of her. And then I just managed to sort of say, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. I hear you. And kind of left the situation. And then we had a chat about it later. And we actually high-fived because it's the first kind of like, you know, anything. We've been friends for years. Never had anything resembling a fallout before. She was like, was that our first fallout? I was like, well, nearly, yes. So we high-fived each other. We came through it. But yeah, it's I love those examples where we get to realize like we're still human. We're still human. We still get to feel all of it.
Yeah, we are still human. And so perfect that setup for me to tell you that, you know, leading up to, so I just launched the Skills Not Pills in May. So for May, 30 days, 30 skills, 30, you know, experts. And it's a movement. So it's going to go on all year, right? So it's not done, you know, it's just beginning. But as I was leading up to doing this, it was a good 6 months of planning, preparation, you know, internal work, you know, getting my own programs dialed in so that should people want to work with me, I'm set up and I'm ready to work with them. You know how that is because you've done all your curriculum. It's a lot of work, you know. So I created my Reinvent Yourself. You've got your Primal program. Like it's a lot of work goes into creating those frameworks to help people. So on the backside, I'm doing all of that. I'm getting that all ready on the heels of my dad dying because my dad died in the fall. So on the heels of that, I'm creating this whole program, getting this movement ready because my guidance was it has to go. Like this is May, it has to happen. I'm like, okay, it's going to happen, and I'm getting all this ready. And 2018 hits, and my family starts falling apart. You know, my mom, my son, like everything is like just falling down around me. And I'm having all this intense imposter syndrome, you know, like how can I possibly go out and start a movement with all this in like my life, my family is like chaotic. You know, I'm strained relationships with my 18-year-old. I'm strained relationships with my mother. You know, my other family members and I aren't talking because of the mother stuff and because of the son stuff. And like this, all this chaos has started. And like, I'm going to go out and like lead a movement, you know, like who am I to do that? And I really had to sit with that quite a bit because I honestly felt that way. Like, this is like, how can I'm not healed. So how can I lead a movement? And really, it's exactly what you said. We're not. None of us are. There, this planet is filled with students that are at different levels of education with the creator, you know?
Yeah.
And even levels is a misnomer because it's not exactly like that. You know, it's like we're at different understandings in different areas of our development. And we're all here learning from each other. And so it's perfectly accurate to go out and start a movement that says, hey, you know, be your own guide through this. Like really own the puzzle. Like step in and solve that puzzle for yourself. Because no one else can. No one else can, like nobody could solve your puzzle, Lian, right? You had to solve it.
Yeah.
No one
As
can pick it up.
frustrating as that is, yeah. For sure.
But we can empathize with each other. We can empathize, we can inspire one another, which is why I do the broadcast, and I know that's why you do yours. We can inspire people to take the journey, to take responsibility for it, meaning I can respond. And I'm the only one who can respond on my own behalf, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the hope here, isn't it? It's, you know, when I look back and I'd got to that point where I was out of hope. I thought, you know, I'm done on trying to find an answer. I think if there's any message here, it's actually we don't need to get to that point of there never being hope. There always is a way of putting that puzzle together. And it's worth keep looking, reaching out to others, getting that support, getting the inspiration, because you will find a way of putting the puzzle together.
Yeah, you will. It's not unsolvable. You know, I just realized that I was loved so much when I finally got to that point of, oh, I'm loved. I
Mm.
realized in that moment, and you're nodding, that I would have never been given an unsolvable puzzle. That's not going
Yeah.
to happen. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. I really appreciate that and sharing your wisdom. How can people connect with you, to dive deeper with you?
So, as we mentioned, we've got a podcast called the Primal Happiness Show. And if you go to our website, which is primalhappiness.co, and that's co.co, and you'll see the link there. It's we've got, I say, nearly 190 shows on so many different topics. We try to, whilst they're all kind of coming from this understanding of that real primal, deep down innate happiness, and also how we can connect back into that, which is all sorts of ways that are just very natural to human beings. This isn't kind of like jazzy, futuristic stuff. This is actually stuff that's very simple and very natural for human beings. And so we've done shows that are on a huge range of topics. I mean, literally, I wouldn't say everything under the sun, but it's getting that way, whether it's anxiety, depression, having great sex, starting a business, you name it, we've probably done a show on it. So yeah, if you're interested in finding out more, that's probably a very good place to start.
And you can, the tip I shared on your show was about earth paintings.
Yes. Yeah. Fabulous.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It was great to interview you, and it was great to give you that experience of being interviewed, right? Instead of doing the
Thank you so
interviewing.
much. It's flown by, and it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, I give kisses to everybody before we leave Soul Nectar. So here they come, people. Mwah.
Oh, lovely.
Love you guys. We'll see you next time on Soul Nectar.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everybody.